Well, hello and welcome everybody. We are just starting the webinar today, and we give it just a moment or two so people can join in from wherever they're joining from around the world today. Really looking forward to today's session. Just to double check while people are joining the room that you're in the right place. Today we are talking about environmental scanning. We're understanding the field of international higher education, how to keep globally connected and engaged. In my own career experience, there has been my day job, the day-to-day work that I have loved and been happy to pursue. But to do that job well, I have found that it is necessary to be engaged and mindful in a global way beyond what those immediate tasks are. And that's one of the themes we're going to be touching on today. The Gateway Leadership Institute this fall of 2022 is focused on reimagining the international higher education career, or the careers in international higher ed. So give it just one more moment. I see a lot of people joining us. I think, are we ready to go ahead and get started?
I think so. And if you could just introduce yourself using the chat box, tell us where you're from, where you're joining us from today, that would be perfect.
Yeah, we always appreciate that. It's a way for everybody who is at the webinar live and in person today, extend your network, see who's here, find each other on LinkedIn, make and foster those connections, because that's really what serves us best as we try to do well, both in our careers and advancing our careers. But okay, so it seems like everybody should be here and in the right place. It's October 24th, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And today we're going to jump into understanding the field to keep globally connected and engaged. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're able to host these webinars because of the Gateway International Group. Through Gateway, we offer a variety of solutions for the international higher education professional or divisions of global engagement. We also support learning abroad. We have a variety of resources that we encourage you to visit our website. So even though we're going to focus today on the being globally connected and engaged, be sure to subscribe to the Gateway newsletter or check out the blog periodically to stay connected, because Gateway is dedicated to the international sector of higher education, and we really do offer a lot of different solutions for you. Today, every day, my name is Dr. George Kasenga. I work with day-to-day M Square Media, where I'm an assistant vice president for university relations, where we help support international recruitment. But I've also been part of Gateway for a little over 2 years now, and really excited to work with my colleagues who are about to introduce themselves for the 5th cohort of the Gateway Leadership Institute. Rosa?
Thank you, George. And I noticed that the chat was disabled. I think you can already use it, and you can will be able to fix it if it's not now. And my name is Rosa Almoguera. I work with Edu Alamo as an independent consultant in international education. And I'm joining you all from Spain, where I'm located. And with that, Siming, if you...
Okay, thanks, Dr. George and Dr. Rosa. Hi, everyone. My name is Siming Li, and now I'm the intern for GLI 5. I'm the third-year PhD student in University of Pittsburgh, so I'm based in Pittsburgh. I'm very happy to study and work with everyone. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much to my colleagues. I'll let Rosa take the next portion.
Yes, and as George mentioned, these webinars are made possible thanks to the Gateway Leadership Group, and also thanks to our sponsors, our partnering organizations. In this cohort 5 are Teradota, the Pi News, and Upgrad Abroad. And we're really grateful to them for making this possible, and all at affordable price for our participants. So thank you to all of them. But we also want to thank our sponsoring organizations who help us in various ways in this institute. The first one is Verify Ed, who provides digital certificates for our participants. Other of our sponsors are Shorelight, Stylus, On Point Global Strategies and Coaching, and I See a Way. As you can see there in the note, our participants can also get a discount code from Stylus. Thank you again to both our participating organizations and sponsoring organizations.
Now we're going to jump into the substance of today's webinar. So we really appreciate you joining us today and through our introduction, but we have some really fantastic leaders in the field who are going to help expand the way we think about and understand these global connections. We're first going to be hearing from Dr. Maureen Manning, who is with the PI News. She's their Vice President of Strategy and Insight. And I had the good fortune of joining her not too long ago in Toronto for the PI Live North America. It was just an incredible event, and you should look for this in the future if you have the opportunity to attend. We're next going to hear from Jennifer Ivanek, who is the Executive Director of the Office of Global Engagement at Central Michigan University. Again, she's a leader in our field, and she'll have an opportunity to talk about her roles with NAFSA and some of the different ways that she has engaged and grown professionally so that you can leverage and benefit from her experience. And then also Sarah Spencer, who's the founder of On Point Global Strategies and Coaching. We're going to learn a little bit about the coaching, introduction to coaching opportunity that is available for everybody participating today. But I also had the good fortune to meet with her in Wyoming not too long ago, where we did some hiking and really got to think about career objectives and career planning. And so I know that today we have just a powerhouse of a panel, and I don't want to be in between all of the great information they have to share with you today. While you are listening to the webinar, please use the Q&A feature to direct any questions you have for the panelists. We've reserved time at the end for a Q&A with everybody. You can continue to use the chat, introduce yourselves once it's fully activated, and any questions that find their way into the chat, we're going to try to redirect into the Q&A, since that helps us manage things. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So just really excited for today's topic and really appreciate everybody who is here today. We're first going to be hearing from Dr. Maureen Manning. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let her take over from here.
Thanks so much, George. I really appreciate the kind introduction. And I am also just as excited to be here with the panelists and the Gateway affiliates today to talk about something that's so important, staying connected and staying engaged in international education. And so, as you mentioned, we just recently connected and engaged, not connected for the first time, certainly, but in person at the PI Live event in Toronto. And my colleagues are going to be talking about the importance of engagement and going to webinars, seminars, conferences, etc. So I'm not going to get too much into that because I don't want to steal any thunder. And I know there's lots of great conversations coming up around that topic. But what I would love to talk about today is staying and remaining engaged in having an online presence, particularly around news sources and media sources, both reading and learning from others' case studies, stories, and experiences, as well as sharing your own, building your knowledge network, building your community, and building your personal brand. So I represent, as George said, I represent the PI. We are, our backbone is a media outlet, a news media outlet at thepinews.com. We also offer a variety of other innovative events, such as the PI Live that George just referenced, as well as executive searches, job board, etc. So I want to talk about some of the ways to connect online and some of my favorite sources for news beyond the PI, as well as hear from others what theirs are as well. So I know there's time for Q&A afterwards, but I really encourage you to pop in the chat, or if you have something that you'd like to share, please do. I think important part of this building our knowledge network together is being able to share those experiences back and forth. So please jump in and share. Okay, so as I mentioned, some of the my go-to resources, and I'm very curious to hear what my colleagues' resources are, as well as participants in the seminar. But of course, first and foremost for me is the PI News. And not just because I work for Pi, but long before I worked for Pi, it was a go-to news source for me, particularly because of its global lens. So it covers international education across the globe. Pi has offices in multiple different countries, and freelance and full-time reporters who work from those different countries, in those different countries, who always have their ear to the ground, looking for what the latest trends are, deeply analyzing those trends and putting stories out, as well as breaking news, human interest stories in IE, what's going on in certain college campuses. Our reporters often have folks from campuses reaching out to them and sharing their stories. And that's how we hear a lot about what's going on an individual campus level. So I encourage all of you here, if you have something that you'd like to share, please reach out to one of our reporters, reach out to me, and I'll make sure that your lead gets to the right person if you'd like to share. We'll talk about sharing in just a minute. Back to the resources. Other obvious go-tos for me are the Chronicle of Higher Education, particularly Karen Fisher's Latitudes newsletter. If you don't subscribe to this, you should absolutely get on that listserv after this webinar. Times Higher Ed, University World News, as well as some curated collection of weekly article like the Gateway newsletter. Again, if you're not on that listserv, although I have a feeling many of you, if not most, are, if you're here, but if you're not, that's a newsletter that you definitely need to get on. SIMIE has a roundup, a lot of social media type information on that, as well as the NAFSA newsletter. So those are my absolute go-tos, can't miss them, wouldn't miss a day or a week of their information. I'm curious to hear others. I'm looking at the chat now. I don't know if we have okay, yeah, Chronicle, exactly. Thanks for sharing those links, George. Other go-tos for folks, either in the chat or out loud? Yeah, Latitude, yeah. Okay, great. Sarah, thanks. Yeah, the AIEC and the EAIE newsletters, yes. Yes, excellent. Listserv. So these, if you want to write down, or I don't know, George, should they have the they get the copy of the recording afterwards so that they can check the chat. Great. Okay. So here's the biggest challenge, and it's always been a challenge for me, and likely for many in this group too, is really getting into the habit. And now I have a routine and a schedule to get into that habit. There are so many news sources out there, so many articles. I wish I could read them all. I don't have time to read all of the news articles that I want to read, nor the scholarly articles that I want to read. So what I do is I start my day every day with that combination of news reading and scholarly reading so that I can stay abreast in what the current trends are happening in the field, as well as the current research that's happening in the field. So I take that time where I turn off my ringer, I turn off my alerts on my laptop, and I spend that time reading, and I start my day with it and I end my day with it. And I built it into my routine. As busy as my day is, the only exception to that rule will probably be when I'm at a conference, because that is a full on morning, noon, and night. But other than that, when I'm working in the office, and I work in a home office, I am constantly doing that. When I worked in an office on a campus, I did that as well. I found that carving out that time and putting it on my schedule as part of my daily routines, and typically it would mean that I would come in a little bit early just to get that in. Even if it's only a small amount of time that you can allot, I think having it on your schedule makes a huge, huge difference. I also read while I walk. I'm not a fast walker. I used to be a runner before COVID. Now I'm more of a walker, but on my treadmill, I also read. I'm just trying to carve out as much time as I can to make sure that I am on top of things. Now that I work for a media organization, I absolutely have to be on top of things, because I have to know what's going on in the field and report back and offer information to our reporters and such. But even when I worked in an office, it was the same thing. I needed to be engaged in what was going on in our field. And I needed that global lens as well. It wasn't enough, excuse me, for me to have a solid understanding of what was happening in the US context, but also how that relates, how the US context fits into the larger picture. So having that global lens on our news was absolutely essential. So I'm wondering what your strategies are. We know how busy things are. How often and when do you make time to read scholarly material, news material related to IE? And what are you reading? anyone want to jump in?
Well, they don't have, the participants don't have the capacity to share back. So we'll reserve that
okay.
for the Q&A portion.
Perfect. Okay, thanks.
No
So
problem.
the next part is let's talk about leveling it up on two different levels. So the next easy lift, when we talk about building your own brand and building your connections, is having an online presence, particularly on LinkedIn, building that LinkedIn presence. And how do you do that? So an easy lift, you have an article, you just, you schedule that 15 minutes, say 15 minutes before your day starts every day to get that article read or that piece of news, sharing it on socials, sharing it on your LinkedIn or your Twitter with your top takeaway or top 3 takeaways. So that's not a heavy lift. You're not creating an article, you're not writing an article, you're just sharing what your key takeaway, even if it's one, is. You're also sharing with your colleagues in the IE community because you're keying them into an article that resonated with you. And if it resonated with you, there's a high likelihood that it's also going to resonate with your colleague who you are connected with on LinkedIn. So on that, building, when I think about building an online profile and building your personal brand, George talked about careers, the current career, as well as thinking ahead about career advancement, if that's something that you're interested in. And I think of C's when I think of building that connection. So consistency, content, and connections. So when you think about LinkedIn, think about it through those through those 3 or 4 C's. Connections, not reaching out to others who share your job title, job alike, belonging to LinkedIn groups, making sure you're following all of these news sources on LinkedIn, as well as professional organizations on LinkedIn and what they have to say, even if you don't belong to that particular organization. If it's adjacent, if it's directly related to IE or your specific niche, great. If it's adjacent, even, it may well have some good information. And then connecting with some thought leaders in the field. I find that many folks are quite happy to connect on LinkedIn, even if you haven't made that personal connection. So connecting, consistency in posting, again, even if it's just you're just sharing an article with one blurb, one key takeaway, that's great. You want to take it to the next level, however. Let's talk about the content piece of that, positioning your own self as a thought leader. And then also by doing so, you're also supporting the knowledge community. So there are different ways. If you have articles, and they don't have to be scholarly articles that you're sending to peer-reviewed journals, but they could be more blogs, human interest pieces in IE. There are a variety of handy links for you here where you can submit your works, maybe their takeaways or musings on a certain topic. So the Pi has a blog you're welcome to submit to. Intercultural Connector, Darla Deerdorf's nonprofit, the EIAE Journal, Frontiers has opportunities that aren't just for peer-reviewed scholarly articles. So there are plenty of other opportunities, and I welcome you to put, if you have others, to put them in the chat so that we can all learn together on that. And the last piece that I wanted to get into before I turn it over to colleagues is amplifying student voice. We're talking about amplifying the message of your organization. Of course, you creating content or someone on your staff creating content is an easy go-to. It's time consuming, of course, but that's something that we naturally go to. Amplifying student voice, although it certainly has gained some traction, is still an underutilized source of getting your brand message across. And it's a really important way to do it as well. It encourages agency, and it is a key opportunity to have students get involved in crafting and relaying the narrative that directly involves their own stories. So my question to you is, and again, we can save this for the Q&A part, you can put it in the chat, but I'm curious to hear about what ways you engage students in crafting and relaying their own narrative. How do they tell their stories? Is it through social media? Do you have student interns working on your TikTok pages? Do you have students regularly contributing to your newsletters, blogs, website, pages, web pages, etc., for your organization? And then I encourage you to think about how you can increase those opportunities, how you can enhance opportunities that are already happening in your organization so that student voice is put at the forefront, that students always have a seat at the table. And just so you can get an idea of where our community is located, we are a global organization. These numbers constantly shift. Last month, number one was the US. We are neck and neck with India. We always go back and forth. Different sections underneath the big pie umbrella. We have many different things that we do. Please check us out, and my email and my LinkedIn profile. I encourage you to reach out to me, and I hope that we can continue this conversation both in the Q&A later as well as offline.
No, fantastic, Maureen. Thank you so much. It's not just the pie, but all of these resources you shared. For our attendees today, one of the things that is so valuable to us, and who we're able to have join as panelists, is that they are they're demonstrated leaders in the field. And so while of course it makes sense to showcase pie because that's where Maureen is, the pie is a leader in the field, and I appreciate all the different resources you've introduced for everybody today. Now we're going to go ahead and progress in our presentation. We're next going to be hearing, so thank you, of course, Maureen. Next, we're going to be hearing from Jennifer in the Office of Global Engagement at Central Michigan University. And so Jennifer, I'll let you take over the slides.
All right, good afternoon or good morning or good evening, depending on where you are coming from. It's so great to join you today. Let me just share my screen. All right, does that look okay? All right, great. So I did want to say, I totally agree with the comments before about being involved on LinkedIn, sharing articles, connecting with people. I have made a lot of professional connections that way. So ditto definitely to that point. I have always been in university-based jobs within international education. I started in Ed Abroad in 2007, eventually, through some different promotions, became a director, and now I just hit my 4-year mark as a senior international officer at Central Michigan University. So whenever I think about this topic, I was thinking about it in the context of sort of my own journey of how did I, knowing that I wanted to progress through the field, what did I do? What kind of resources did I lean on to further my knowledge in the field and to really establish myself in the way that Maureen was just talking about as a thought leader? How did I pursue all of that? So I wanted to share some of these things with you. So some of it is related to what you just heard, but then I'm adding a little bit more kind of about really how you can take stock of your career and get to where you want to go. So first and foremost, staying informed. I use many of the same resources that were shared earlier and then some. So I have listed a whole bunch of things here for you. And I will put the links to them whenever I'm done. I'll add them to the chat. But the point that I wanted to make here is that it's important to be informed about international education from a US perspective, from a global perspective, to be aware of trends that are not even necessarily relevant to your daily job. So for instance, I spent many years in Ed Abroad. I realized at some point I had a knowledge gap in terms of international admissions or things happening with immigration that would affect international students. And I thought, if I want to move up, I should probably start learning about that too. So there's one thing to be informed, for purposes of your job. It's another to be informed just to be a more well-rounded professional. So I really started being cognizant about subscribing to a lot of these different newsletters or looking them up on LinkedIn, et cetera, to really, be aware of what was going on both in the US and abroad. And then another really key thing that I'm wondering if anyone else on this call has experienced, but I am very often asked by leaders at my institution, what are our peers doing? Or what are the competitors doing? So it's one thing to have read an article about, Harvard or something, but it's, we're an R2, we're a public institution. So often if I say, well, I know such and such is doing this, they don't want to know that. They want to know, what are our direct peers doing? What would make sense for us in our institutional context? So I do also spend time looking up on websites and social medias and going to, presentations and reading articles by people who are at schools like mine, because that is what I find to be really compelling to people to whom I report on my campus. For sake of time, I will not read each and every one of these things, but I am happy to share more information in the chat, or we can connect afterwards if you want to learn more about any of these things. I am also I am involved in NAFSA's international education leadership knowledge community. I'm actually the incoming chair for next year, so I try not to be too heavy on the NAFSA side of things, but I definitely encourage you to join the different networks and forums that are available through NAFSA's website. You don't even have to be a paid NAFSA member to get newsletters and things from the different knowledge communities and member interest groups. So I highly recommend that if you are on a budget and can't afford the actual NAFSA membership, there are still things you can take advantage of. I also think it's very important, as Maureen was saying too, to build your reputation in the field. You might, I know I still feel this way a lot. Like, what do I really have to contribute? I'm learning from others. I'm still growing. Who wants to hear from me? But as it turns out, people do want to hear from you, even if it's just to say, yeah, I experienced those same things, or, well, I really learned something about, how you approached a situation. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to become involved in the field. And not, it's obvious, yeah, you can go to conferences, you can pay to have association memberships, but that takes a lot of money and often employer buy-in. But there are things that you can do to become known in the field and get your voice out there that don't even necessarily have to require a lot of money. It's more about your time, which time could be money too. But I would say, I've done things over the years, like serving as a scholarship application reviewer through IIE, for critical languages scholarships, Fulbright. I actually serve as a peer reviewer for the Frontiers Journal, which is from Forum on Education Abroad. I am always somebody who, if someone emails me and says, hey, will you contribute to my research for my dissertation, or somebody puts a question on SQCell, hey, trying to find out what other schools are doing, I often reply to those because I think it's good to help each other, but also then you make a connection and then you end up learning what they're doing. So I think, these are some things that other people may not always think about so readily. So I would definitely encourage you to get involved in these kinds of ways. And I can say, as somebody who serves as leadership on different committees, not as many people volunteer as you might think. So if you are interested at all in getting involved, I can guarantee anyone who runs a committee would love to have you volunteer. I kind of mentioned this before, but I think I know all of you on the call are probably at different points in your career or involved in different ways in international education. But again, like I was saying about my own professional journey, I realized at some point that I had this limitation of knowing a lot about ed abroad and really not a lot about anything else. So that was something that I really was cognizant about, starting to develop this knowledge in other ways. So for instance, several years ago, I was like, you know what? I've been to NAFSA a million times. I don't know how many more times I can go to sessions about pre-departure orientation, things like that. So I actually just started going to sessions about international student and scholar services topics, immigration updates from USCIS. And I kind of felt like I had landed on Mars. I didn't know what they were talking about, but it was a great way to sort of gain some terminology and just start to get some, background on things that eventually then I felt like I became a little more fluent in that language, so to speak. And now I actually oversee our ISSS here. So, I really made it a point to seek out opportunities to talk to people who worked in different parts of international education than me. Even if I didn't understand what the heck they were talking about, I still just tried to absorb as much as I could. And that's kind of how I learn. I'm a context person. So I realized, okay, after a year of doing these types of things, I'm now starting to make the connections. And now I know what CPT and OPT and DS 2019s are. So Now, for any of you who work on a college campus or have the career goal of being more of a leadership position on a college campus, I cannot understate how important it is to also be knowledgeable about navigating higher ed administration. So even though I'd worked on a college campus for many years, until I was in my current role, I had been kind of shielded from what goes on in kind of the management level of higher ed. And now I'm in that job where I have to, advocate for my office and for, internationalization. And so that was a real learning curve for me. Your institution most likely in some way, shape, or form utilizes shared governance. There's different sort of political things at play, and who has the explicit decision-making authority versus more of the tacit decision-making authority. These all, change depending on what campus you're on. So I would really encourage you, even if you're not in a position yet that you're dealing with this every day, to start learning about some of those higher ed structures. So there are a couple of books that I have found really helpful. One is called the College Administrator Survival Guide. Another is How Colleges Work. And so these just both talk about kind of the structures that exist on a college campus, how decisions are made, how management works, how you work with faculty. I've also participated in the NAFSA Management Development Program, which is a really great sort of gateway professional learning experience if you have never been in a management position before. And then I've also listed a few other sources here that, again, I will put links to these things in the chat. If you are, I think for the most part, these are things that you would have access to through your institution. I'm not sure just as an individual to what extent you could sort of subscribe to these things, but a lot of times your institution might actually have memberships to these larger organizations that you can tap into. You just have to ask somebody. So like a lot of these things are like ACE and EAB, those are managed through our provost office. So I just had to say, hey, is there any way I could get access to the stuff we get through these organizations? Okay, I have 2 more points to make. So another one is the importance of tech skills. I am 42, so I grew up in that time period where I remember not having internet, and then then we transitioned to everything being online. And I've really seen how over the years in my career, how it's like tech has come into every part of your job, even if you think that has nothing to do with you. Like, why do I need to know Excel as a study abroad advisor? But it is so true that more and more, we're expected to do things like data analysis or creating visual graphics as part of our, annual report, or, number crunching in Excel. And or even just doing things like in Teradata, understanding how to build out your database. So if you are someone who you do not consider yourself to be technically savvy, or you're just maybe, in my generation or beyond, where this wasn't really part of what you learned growing up, I would really encourage you to learn some of these basic tech skills, like using Excel and databases and things like that, because it often comes into play, even in my job every day. And a lot of college campuses have free training. There's a lot of either free or paid courses that you can take through different MOOCs and LinkedIn Learning. So you can always learn new things, is my point. And finally, I want to stress that you really should know your worth. Even if you are not looking for a new job, I think it's really helpful actually to review different job descriptions as they come out, so you can see what are the qualifications that they're looking for, either for the job the equivalent job on your campus, or a job you aspire to have. What are the main duties that these jobs entail? To whom does this job report? What are they paying? I think it really gives you a good sense of where you kind of fit, or what your strengths are in. It might help you realize, oh, maybe I would be better off in a director of global, risk management position than working more with curriculum. So it's good to just kind of see what the different types of jobs are that are out there, what they're looking for, and really what the salary is. And there are some great resources that I have put in here that, again, I will link to those, where you can actually find sort of real-time salary information. And that can be a huge tool for you when you are negotiating, whether in your current job or for a future job. I can say, I use these to negotiate salary whenever I started this job. So it was really useful to have access to this kind of information. So I will leave you with definitely keep learning, keep growing, keep getting yourself out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. This is fantastic information. And I will say for what you, as you were speaking, what it reminded me of is that, over the arc of a career, you're working with people and you may identify as one of these people. Some people are in international ed because it's a job that, it's what they do to pay their bills, and they don't think of it beyond whatever they're doing 9 to 5. That's perfectly good. There are also people who are thinking about it as a career. They want to be engaged. They invest a lot more of themselves in it. And I have found this kind of back and forth has waxed and wanes at different periods in my life also, on what was the, what level of investment that I had. But on those resources you shared, even today, I still look at the job descriptions for things that are related to my career path, or it might be on my career path. I save PDFs of them all the time, because eventually any one of us could be the person who has to write one of these job descriptions. And it's really helpful to see the thinking of others along the way. So thank you so much for that great contribution. And again, any Q&A that folks have, we're going to reserve that for the last 10 to 15 minutes. Next, we're going to be hearing from Sarah Spencer. She is the founder of On Point Global Strategies and Coaching. And so we're going to go ahead and launch into Sarah's presentation. Thank you so much, Sarah. Are you with us now?
I am. Thank you so much, George. George is going to drive my slides since we just have a few of them. So thank you again to both Rosa and George. I'm delighted to partner with Gateway on both this Global Leadership Institute, and as well as to offer professional and career coaching to the Gateway community. As we've been reflecting, I'm celebrating my 30th anniversary as a global educator next year. And I love the fact that this webinar provided an opportunity for me to reflect on some of those key decisions in my own career, and reminded me of balancing both serendipity as well as intentionality. And everybody has talked, Jennifer, you were just talking about all the acronyms, right? Our own language in international education, and always still learning new acronyms. So my background actually includes advancing through multiple positions at a US university. It was a decision I made because I was place-bound at family situations, but I also volunteered for NAFSA, the Foreign Education Abroad, and a variety of board positions. And all of the volunteering provided for me, to quote one sage of the sector, that professional development and recognition that was not always available at my university. And for those of you who have ever heard of Joan Gore, I thank her for that amazing quote. I think about it all the time. So in the last 5 years, I founded On Point Global Strategy and Coaching to support organizations with strategic projects, training, leadership and team development, and of course, individual professional coaching. And I'm also a founding board member of the Global Leadership League, which I'm going to talk about in just a sec. So I think as we were talking about expanding kind of the global, expanding portfolios through global engagement, I feel much more globally connected in the last part of my career than I did in my first. And Maureen, I must just say that a year ago, I was asked on a professional development webinar, what was the one thing I wish I had had earlier in my career? And I said the Pi News. So thank you again for providing a truly global snapshot on international education, which I think was very much missing earlier in my days. So I'm just going to talk quickly about the league. I'm going to provide a few ideas on what to do with all of this environmental scanning. And as I know there's a diverse group, I'd like to talk a little bit about professional development and training at a really critical time as we rebuild capacity and budgets, and how some of these things might impact your career. So next slide, George. Thank you so much. So in case you were unfamiliar, the League is a volunteer-led membership organization created 5 years ago to provide real safe spaces through community, knowledge, and learning from each other, really for professionals who are committed in both global and higher ed engagement. And we provide holistic support. So we do integrate both that professional and the personal at a very accessible cost. I'm just going to mention a couple key things. Our flagship program is the mentoring circles. We know that professionals want some sort of mentoring, which could change depending on where you are in your career. So we decided to create a solution with, we call them 4x4s, 4 participants, 4 months, 1 topic. You can see the current topics available. We also, from a career connection standpoint, we pair a guide and a seeker for a short-term mentoring session. And this could be, how do I plan for my next job? I have a 1-person office. I need to propose a new position. I want to assess my leadership skills. And the last great free resource I'm going to mention is In the Vault with Sophia Confidential, which is our sector's own, say, Dear Abby, Abby Dickinson, almost agony aunt with amazing, amazing, amazing professional advice. So that's on the website. And also if you follow the league on LinkedIn, you'll be able to get notices. So next slide, please. So thank you. So I hope all of you, if you're listening to this, have also gone back to listen to the first webinar, which had amazing, amazing resources, as both Maureen and Jennifer have talked about today. And I think in the last decade, there's been such a significant change regarding how much rich content we have available and how accessible it is to us compared to, a traditional conference presentation or books that we may have read. So you may wonder how to best navigate or parse the best investments of your time and interests, or you might be finding all of this just a bit overwhelming and wonder where to start. So I'm going to provide a super brief structure for you to consider and adapt, no matter your position, organization, an individual, or part of a group. And Maureen talked about, reading in the morning and creating that time. This could either be for an individual or particularly for those of you who are part of a team. So I will say, select a new topic. What do you not know as we reimagine the sector? This could be carbon neutrality, which was a huge topic at the Forum Milan conference I was at last week. New recruitment markets, tracking both the Australian and the Canadian IE market, or building a skill and competency like managing up. You want to make it realistic on how long you want to explore this topic. It could be monthly, quarterly, biannually. Obviously, you want to review these sources. That's a lot of that environmental scanning we've been talking about. Obviously, all those newsletter, conference sessions, webinars, and how many of you have registered for a webinar you really wanted to participate in or go back and listen to, and it's still sitting in your inbox? Here's an opportunity to look at all those. I also have many in my inbox as well. So this is where the coaching part comes in. Once you delve into a source, what are your top learning points? Was there an aha moment? What energized you? What sparked curiosity and more discovery? And is there anything you really disagreed with? So it's your opportunity to really get into that source, whatever it is. If you're in a team, agree to the modality to share. This could be a staff meeting, a special time, virtual or in-person tea or coffee or happy hour. I always suggest keeping in sight the how of these learning points. How do these learning points could or do impact your job, how you want to design your career, or how you're managing or leading others. And this obviously will build over time. I think it's really important to document your key insights, to either share or keep it for you. One of the key questions I offer to clients is, what energizes you? And I can't tell you how often they do not have an answer. So again, that energy, kind of see what would be an interest for you as you plan in your career. Obviously, if you're doing this as part of a team, this also shows your curiosity or an opportunity to identify your gaps in order to add additional support. And obviously, we can integrate all of this into planning, strategic, annual, your own career backpack, etc. So, okay, and the last slide, if you can switch to that, is a note. We really did want to talk in this webinar about professional development and training. Obviously, just as a reminder, training refers to the process of increasing knowledge, skills, and abilities for you to do your work, where development refers to the overall growth of your employees, especially learning opportunities that are designed for this growth. So both professional development training opportunities can be found offered internally to an organization, say if you work at a university, or externally through all the associations and the organizations that we've been suggesting as part of this environmental scanning. I'm going to mention, I think Jennifer talked about a little bit, but I'm going to call them micro-credential sources. One newer source that we did not have back in the day are all of the micro sources. So boot camps, modular learning opportunities through Coursera, Google, LinkedIn Learning, the Global or the Gateway Leadership Institute. These obviously are cost effective and very accessible. And I think I always advise you want to keep an eye out to how it applies to the global education or higher education context. Travel. Are you lucky enough that you get to travel? How often have you heard that? Travel is not a perk of our jobs. Many times it is required, or it could be part of your professional development opportunity or professional development plan, but just make sure that it's not a perk and we are not lucky. It is what we do in student mobility. So many professional development and training budgets were reduced since 2020, so it's important to restore and expand to meet current capacity, these new ideas and goals, which means no matter your role, make sure that you understand that current process and the budget within your organization or your unit, and make it part of the plan. So make sure if you're a leader or a new leader, or you're an individual contributor, hopefully the process is transparent. You want to align all of your professional development training with your organizational goals in support of your position, the team, and the office. Obviously, these hopefully are integrated in the annual performance management process, or as it was called last week at the forum, ongoing conversations. Are there rotations for both volunteer or elected positions, conferences, or site visits? And I love the fact that my colleagues have each mentioned thought leadership, so I'm going to round it out for the third. I love the fact that we have opportunities to propose conference sessions within international education, and just make sure you clarify if you receive funding. But this is an opportunity to take your scanning, your work, create new networks, and to be part of this amazing thought leadership that we've had as part of the sector. So I'm going to wrap up. George, you can flip it to the next slide, and I think you have a slide too. Obviously, like others, invite to keep in touch. There's my email. And George, I wonder if you're going to flip to the next slide, but through Gateway, I do offer a free half-an-hour consultation or assessment regarding career and profession.
Okay, the transition there caused a little glitch, but I think you are seeing the Sarah slide right now. So perfect. So this link, of course, you can find through the Gateway website, but it will be, it's typed out so that you have access to it easily. So thank you so much for that, Sarah. That was fantastic. Really appreciate all the insights of all of our different panelists today. Next, I also want to highlight that we will be offering through Gateway my apologies. I guess I should double check. What is everybody seeing right now?
Quan.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Let me make this proper size. So in addition to what Sarah's offering in terms of the consultation, we do want to highlight for everybody that as part of this Gateway Leadership Institute, we are also offering a LinkedIn profile optimization workshop. This is free of charge, but it does have a registration requirement. And so if you visit the Gateway website or email us, we'll be happy to share this information with you. But this is going to be happening on Friday, November 18th at noon Eastern time. So just want to point that out to you. Also, it's worth noting, I think just after Halloween, the 1st of the new year, or the 1st of October, beginning of October, we're going to have the time change. So be mindful of that as you are thinking about when is noon and when is 1 and all of these different things. So thank you so much for that. So we're at a spot now where we have about 10 to 12 minutes. I'm going to ask my colleague, Rosa, to jump in and help facilitate some questions with our panelists.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists, and it's been so rich and I think full of suggestions and things that, as we have heard from them and from all of us, I think it would have been so useful to have when we were working or when we were looking for a job, etc. And one of the questions that we have, and please, I invite any of our 3 panelists to answer it, is from someone in the webinar, and they were asking if there are paid opportunities in the field to share a thought leadership.
I'll jump in here to start, and then my colleagues can add to that if that's okay. So a lot of if we're talking about conference presentations and the call for presenters that we've mentioned today in this webinar, and you've likely seen on your LinkedIn page as well, a lot of those are not paid speaking engagement. You may get a reduced rate on your conference registration. Some conferences will even waive the registration fee for panelists and presenters. However, if you're a keynote speaker, then not only is that fee waived, but often there will be an honorarium, a stipend, some form of payment, as well as some travel expenses as well. So it's really individual according to the conference or according to the organization who is sponsoring your attendance. So if you're interested in doing this, I would recommend that you start with some of these call for presenters for some of the national conferences that we've mentioned today, NAFSA, AIEA, etc. Get yourself known as one of these thought leaders and be a regular on the conference circuit. And the more and more you get yourself out there and connect with others, the more you will be considered as a thought leader and be thought of for these keynote speaker opportunities, or to have organizations bring you in privately as whether it's a consultant or some sort of presenter for which there would be a stipend available.
Thank you, Maureen. Anyone else that wants to answer?
I'll share. I typed this in there, but in case you didn't see it, so NAFSA, you probably know they have publications that come out every year on different topics within international education. They often will seek someone to serve, or two people to serve as editors of a publication. So you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of organizing content, seeking contributors. And so they often then will pay or offer some type of honorarium or stipend for the work involved in serving as an editor.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that. I don't know, Sarah, if you want to add anything?
I think my colleagues have answered it quite nicely. So yeah, and as a person who co-edited the first and second edition of the Guide to Successful Short-Term Programs Abroad, it was certainly probably not commensurate with all the time invested, but it was a really important resource both for the field as well as for my own professional development.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes. And we have a question from Tom Millington, and he says, one of the challenges in international education is access to publications. Routledge, for example, can charge between $200 and $300 for a book that could be of value to international educators, but that figure prohibits many people from accessing it. Do you have any idea how to make these resources available to those who may not have the funds to purchase them?
I will say one thing quickly. Hello, Tom, that as a person who was at a university who had budget and everything for a very long time and then left. So I, like Tom, am a founder of an organization and responsible for funding. I have actually asked my colleagues at universities to borrow these books and to be able to read articles, do that scanning, and then actually to even make some copies, some PDF copies with my phone for the things that I really want. So I am not above of asking colleagues.
Yeah, I know Tom too. Hi, Tom. And I know that you have your own organization. And so, I was typing my answer and about, tapping into our university library resources. And then I was thinking, oh yeah, if you're not in a campus-based job, that would be really challenging. And so, Sarah, thank you for sharing that, because I do think it, kind of requires you to be a little entrepreneurial. And it is frustrating because, it's nice that we have that available to us, because at the end of the day, the university wants us to do our jobs better. And part of that is, having access to these things. But it also helps you as a person in your career and professional development. And so if you're not already attached to university, it is quite a high barrier to getting access to those resources, just even for your own professional development. So Sarah, thanks for sharing what you do.
I'll add to that more of a question. I was going to say the same thing as Jennifer. So even though I don't work full-time on a campus, I did hold on to my university affiliation. I still work with just a handful of doctoral students who are very close to defending their dissertation. So I agreed to stay on as their chair until they finish. So I do have that affiliation. So I am able to access the online materials through the university library, but as well, my alumni, I'm an alumni of different universities, and they also offer access to their alums. So I'm wondering if the university where you went also offers that access to alum, and it's worth an email, I think. And hi, Tom, too.
Thank you, all of you. And it's exactly the same thing that Andrew Wingfield suggests in the chat, being as an alumnus, checking whether you have that availability. And there's another question from one of the attendees, which says, can the panelists share their experience on professional associations, committees, or boards? What are some of your key takeaways or insights?
I think I'll start really quickly addressing that a little bit. I don't think I would be the professional that I have been and had such a wonderful career and enjoyed it so much without the committee and the board work. The key takeaways for me is it was immediately expanding my networks. Again, this is before the Global Leadership League and Pi News webinars and all of that online learning that we've had over the last few years. So for me, I was at the forum and I saw so many people that I was on a board with 15 years ago, or was on a site visit with, a long time ago as well, and keeping those connections. And they are my peer community. So they are my peer mentors as they've advanced through their careers, and really keeping those connections. And I think there is nothing, back 2006, I was part of the NAFSA restructuring project in about 3 levels down at the Washington, D.C. Hilton. And that the Education Abroad group, we are still good friends, and I still see them all the time. So I think, again, for that professional, almost friendship, if you will, and those connections, I found them very invaluable. And I'm sure Jennifer and Maureen have other experiences to share.
Oh, I can. So I'm very involved. I'm someone who likes to be involved. I have a hard time saying no, but I really do derive so much personal benefit from it. Ditto to everything Sarah just said. I won't repeat, but yeah, it's really, I've been involved in NAFSA, and I also am on some AIEA committees. That's been the bulk of my involvement. I've done some working groups for Forum, and in addition to expanding my own professional network and just helping me be more aware of what's going on, I will also say that it helped me to some extent overcome a little bit of imposter syndrome. Especially when you move up into a higher level job, you can sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. Everybody else does, but not me. But actually, as you talk to more of your peers, you find out, okay, my hunch was correct, or yeah, okay, I was right when I thought that, or everybody's confused by this, right? So that's also something that I've gained from being involved in those types of activities.
And I won't add too much because you both covered it so brilliantly, but I will say that in organizations that I've been involved in and continue to be involved in, it's not only wonderful for my own learning and development, but also I find that validation piece as well, because sometimes, especially when we work remotely, we work in silos and we're only aware of, what's going on in these 4 walls and what I'm directly involved with. So to hear about some of these other issues that are happening, and then get solutions, because I know that I'll likely run into something similar down the road, or be able to share from my experience for somebody I've experienced what they're going through now. It's a lot of sharing. And there's one group, a global education group in Massachusetts that I'm involved with, and we meet every other month in person now, post-pandemic. But we call it unofficially the Oasis is a name for it, but because it is an oasis, and it's refreshing, it's a breath of fresh air, and it's a great time to network in person with colleagues and really hear about the joys and the challenges that others are experiencing, and then lend support and collegiality, and it's just wonderful. So I can't recommend them highly enough.
I also had another thought while you were talking, is that when you serve in those roles, you also then have a voice in shaping the field and advocating for important issues, creation of resources, et cetera. So I think from that perspective, it's really important too, because you're representing the field, not just yourself.
Well, thank you to all of you, to all of the panelists, but also to the attendees for their questions and their comments in the chat box, and being mindful with time, and we don't want to run over your time. George, if you can finished our
Yeah, I mean, it's just remarkable. The conversation can always continue. So find each other on LinkedIn, find each other and connect through email. Thank you so much for everybody's contributions today. Our next webinar is on Monday, November 7th. It's a real powerhouse panel, just like today, but it's going to be called Careering Through Times of Change, looking at, how do we succeed moving forward? And it's just going to be excellent. So please visit the Gateway website to see that information. You could register today. Also, please keep an eye out. We're going to be sending out a survey this week about careers in international education to create some resources, again, to help everybody. But your responses help us identify the resources that you need. So please watch for that survey, and we'll have that out to you real soon. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day. And watch, this will be live available on the Gateway website if you want to revisit it at any time. Thanks, everybody.